Well, first of all, Congresswoman, thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We love having you in Sussex County.
We love being in Sussex County.
Well, and that's my first question is, your campaign, what do you see the biggest issues in Sussex County? And we'll talk about this affordability plan, but in general, what do you think are the biggest issues down here in Sussex?
Well, first of all, I have to say it was important for me to start with this interview in Sussex County. Sussex County for me has been a part of my life for a long time, going all the way back to when I worked for then Governor Carper. And I remember coming to meet in different communities and talking about things like clean drinking water or job opportunities or things for young people to do, in addition to recognizing the diversity of this county. I mean, I tell my colleagues in Washington that Delaware is not as simple as you think. We are urban, suburban, rural, and coastal. And so we really mirror the rest of the country. And when I think about even the first piece of legislation that I got passed, it was as a result of folks in Northern Bethany reaching out to our office and saying, we live in this area where we're not getting flood insurance because the maps are incorrect. And I partnered with a Republican from Florida, and we worked together to fix those maps and to work on conservation resources for our state. That was one of my very first bills. And, part of it may be because, like Sussex County, sometimes people feel like, hey, I'm not seen. And I wanted people in Sussex to know, I see you, I hear you, even if you didn't vote for me, I'm going to represent you, which is why even in that first term, I got on the Agriculture Committee. I was the first person in 120 years from the state of Delaware to get on the Ag Committee.
Wow.
And so, and I pulled all the farmers together and I said, hey, look, it's important, even if you didn't vote for me, I want to represent you. Our theme is when Lisa goes to Washington, we all go to Washington. That was important. So when I think of Sussex County, I think of issues of climate. And so I've gotten a chance to work with Senator Carper on the Shore Act and making sure not just for our beaches, but inland. I've met with mayors and council people and residents and businesses who've experienced the real impacts of climate and extreme weather. When I think of Sussex, I think of infrastructure, just the growth and the dynamism of the folks that are coming here. We've got to make sure that we have roads and bridges, resilient beaches, but also make sure that there's access to broadband internet, because we know during the pandemic, it was one of the #1 things that folks needed to go to school, to work sometimes, to just live and do telehealth, which is another one of my bills, focused bipartisan, was on telehealth. And so I think of access to healthcare here. And so because everything is not so close by, it was important that when I got a chance to get federal dollars directed here, that we worked on things like mobile health vans to go directly to where people are, or provide services in libraries. And so we even invested in libraries in Sussex County. I see it as families, I see it as farmers, I see it as our seniors who retire here and want to make sure that they still have Social Security and Medicare. I see it as our young people who want opportunities, whether it's on the family farm or whether it's getting access to good job training and opportunities and transportation. I see Sussex County as kind of a microcosm of our whole country.
I love that. And you mentioned all the people who are moving here, and part of your plan, which really interested me, said you'll lower rent by speeding up housing production and increasing the housing supply. Here in Sussex County, a lot of people feel like we have too many houses, but none of them are affordable. So how do those things reconcile?
One of the biggest areas, it's interesting, while I was on the Ag Committee and Ed and Labor, and I'm on Energy and Commerce now, one of the #1 issues that I've heard up and down this state, and particularly in Sussex, is about the need for affordable housing. And so one of the things that I worked on, again in a bipartisan way, was a bill called the Housing Supply and Affordability Act. And part of it is to really break down those barriers and that red tape that prevents the production of affordable housing. And so I've even met with local, again, officials
who've shared some of the things that they're doing to be creative. And it's our job on the federal level to make it easier for them to do it, to provide the resources, to provide the planning grants, to provide even innovative ways and models. And so we've been able to do that, but we've also been able to do some things right now without waiting for bills to pass, such as providing resources to organizations like Habitat for Humanity so that they could build more affordable housing, working with organizations in Delaware so that we can modify homes for our seniors so that they can age in place and gracefully and with dignity. So we're looking at multiple ways, but one of the great things about our Housing Supply and Affordability Act is that not only is it bipartisan, but over 100 organizations across the country have supported this legislation. And we feel that's because we're seeing this across the country, not just here in Delaware. So it's been a priority for me so that people can both have lower rents, but also build generational wealth and maybe own their own home.
So this would specifically be for affordable housing, like we just saw in Lewis, that Dutchman's Harvest that's going to build certain units. So this wouldn't just open up the floodgates for developers to build $800,000 houses.
No, I mean, the reality is folks that can build an $800,000 house can afford an $800,000 house. But what we've seen is that it's the school teacher, it's the nurses. I mean, I've even talked to BB Hospital about how it's got to be public-private partnerships to build affordable housing, so that some call it workforce housing. That's really important right now. And I know even for my own family, we came to Delaware in 1969, and I was born in Philadelphia, and we lived in public housing for a short amount of my time. But the ability for my parents to move here, my dad get a job and get an apartment, their first apartment, and then to be able to get our first home, for a kid, that also means stability. It means I can learn, and it means I'm healthy. So it's all connected to each other.
That makes sense. And one part of your plan, which I thought was really interesting for Sussex County, was about your bipartisan farm bill that ensures no American struggles to feed their family. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing this Delivering for Delaware tour. And so part of the tour is to showcase the stories of Delawareans, and also for me to share some of the work that we've already done. But the other part is to hear from Delawareans and to hear some of their challenges, but also ideas for what I could do as our next senator. And so this issue of making sure that we lower the cost of goods, particularly groceries, is really important. Right now, if people are struggling to put food on the table, and I just met with a group of small businesses. One owned a restaurant, and she said people were complaining, the cost of food on your menu is so high. She said, have you gone grocery shopping? She's using the same, to get her products. So I've worked on strengthening our supply chains. People may remember during the pandemic, you could not get PPE, but you also couldn't get baby formula. You couldn't, because of the supply chains and the breakdowns. And so in a bipartisan way, I've worked on legislation that has already gotten out of the House. It passed overwhelming, almost 400 Democrats and Republicans. It's now in the Senate side. That will help strengthen our supply chains and lower the cost of goods, but also make us stronger as a nation. But I also have bills such as one that's focused on food as medicine, allowing for individuals, to get food based on maybe you're a SNAP recipient. Well, this maybe is a prescription. Christiana Care has been working on this, where you can actually use a prescription to get fresh fruits and vegetables, things that are healthy. We also have issues like food deserts.
Right.
And so creating those opportunities to fill those gaps, but also supporting our farmers. Like I said, I was on the Ag Committee. We have a farm bill coming up this year, and we've already done outreach to understand what are some of the priorities that farmers and farming families in Delaware have, so that we can make sure that they are in this farm bill. Again, we are all connected. And so for me, it's important. When we talk about delivering for Delaware, we want people to know there are a lot of issues in the country, but to me, Delaware comes first.
Of course. And with the farm bill and actually all these components, logistically, it would be offering maybe grant programs, training, all the above?
All of the above. All of the above. I mean, the great thing about, even with the Farm Bill, We look at things like crop insurance to protect our farmers,
Right.
but we also look at things like how to create really climate-friendly, environmentally friendly farming, new things. And I started this Future of Work caucus in Congress, a bipartisan caucus, that we did a whole session on the future of agriculture. And even using technology. I went to a farm here in Delaware where the woman was in her kitchen showing me on her iPad how she was controlling the irrigation of her crops. There's precision ag where you can, pick berries and with little robotics. But we also have to deal with all of the issues that really affect us each and every day. So I'm excited about this Delivering for Delaware tour. I'm excited about our run for the Senate because it presents an opportunity to not only to do the work we've done on bringing that clean drinking water and bringing healthcare access and lowering the cost of goods, but it also allows us to do this work on a deeper level and to work on things like, strengthening our democracy. And so I'm really excited.
Yes, absolutely. And I had one specific question about the affordability plan that jumped out at me. It said, you mentioned greedy Wall Street corporations, that's a quote, buying up housing and artificially driving up rent and home prices. Could you tell me some places you've seen that happen?
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality. The reality is we came out of a pandemic. We still have COVID, but we came out of a pandemic. And so many people sacrificed. I mean, whether it was people who sacrificed their time and their lives, to individuals who had to do more with less. And as a result, we want to make sure that there's no price gouging that touches groceries. We want to make sure that folks aren't being taken advantage of by building these, big places and really taking advantage of homeowners or people that are trying to pay their rent. This part of this Delivering for Delaware tour is to say everybody should just pay their fair share. I'm not saying people should not make money. Hey, have at it. That's not a bad thing. But when we take advantage, when we don't pay our fair share, that's why even a fair tax system is so important. And that's one of the challenges. We can't go back. I don't want to see us go back. Those tax cuts, it's one thing when we're providing them for families and it's going to help them, like the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit that lifted 50% of our kids out of poverty. It's another thing when some people are just taking and not doing their fair share.
So you have seen Wall Street corporations doing this in Delaware?
Across the country, this is something that we have seen and heard.
In Delaware as well?
I'm not going to disparage anybody in this interview, but I'm going to put people on notice that we are watching and that we are working to protect consumers and homeowners.
The last question I would have here is, it's a very historic time in our country. I mean, who would have thought a month ago, if we had this interview, it'd be a very different situation. So how do you feel about all of that energy going on?
Well, first of all, it is an exciting and important time. I heard one of my colleagues, Congressman Jim Clyburn, he said, when he was introduced, someone said, this is the most important election of our lifetime. And he said, it's not the most important, it's the most consequential. The consequences of what we do in this election, generations, decades, we will see the results. And so everything from, the history-making nature of who's running as the first woman to represent Delaware in the Senate and the first person of color. But I can speak for myself. I could probably also speak for Kamala Harris in saying, our goal is not to make history. Our goal is to make a difference. That's really why we're here. That's why we do this work. And for anybody who knows me, they know this journey started for me through the tragedy of losing my husband, just from rupturing his Achilles tendon playing basketball before meetings and blood clots traveling to his heart and lungs. And for me, I now get to turn that pain into purpose. And I'm also, this year, got the first and best of the past year, best title I've ever gotten, which is grandmother.
Aww.
I am now a grandmother of a little girl, and I want her to have all of the same rights that I had growing up. I want her to have a planet. I want her to have a democracy in a country, this great republic. And so that inspires me to do the work, as well as all of the children of Delaware.
Final question I have for you, Congresswoman, is why should people vote for you?
Oh, wow, wow. Well, I think one of the reasons people should vote for me is because, as I said, I put Delaware first. I think when I think back to why I decided to run in the very first place, when Charles passed away, I put a big white piece of paper across my living room wall and I said, why me, why now? And I just cut out things and I put things up there and 3 things showed up. One was that people could live their purpose. I was Secretary of Labor in this state. I was head of state personnel. I love jobs and the economy and making sure that we are whole and that we have housing and healthcare and the things that will make us strong. People should be able to live their purpose. The second P was peace. I was an international relations major in undergrad, and I wanted there to be world peace, but I also wanted there to be peace in our communities. So I've worked really hard on the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. I got the Break the Cycle of Violence legislation in there, and it's modeled on things that we're doing here in Delaware, but it brings resources, because even in Sussex County, we know that gun violence and creating safer communities is really important. Peace, and then peace of mind. Mental health is so important, and it's one of my priorities as a member of the Health Subcommittee. And then the last was the planet. Without a planet, it is all a moot point. Right. So I think people should vote for me because I've got their back. We mean it when we say when Lisa goes to Washington, we all go to Washington. Whether you vote for me, whether you like me or not, I am going to do my best to represent you. And I believe that our future is bright. Bright hope is the theme of our campaign. And I just want to bring some bright hope to the Senate, bring some bright hope to Delaware, and bring some bright hope to the country.